G'day there, I'm Dana from Fantail Valley. My last video was too big. I did too much in one day, so I have split it into two videos. This is part 2, so if you want to check out part 1, I'll link it up in the cards for you at the top, and I hope you enjoy this one. I am hoping to get some barley fodder started. We're going to give that a try. I've done it before for the rabbits, but I'm going to try and do it both for the rabbits and the pigs this winter. I'm not convinced it'll work whether or not it's just going to get ravaged by rats and mice. I'm going to be growing it in the tunnel house, so I'll have to wait and see how that goes. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I grew almost 200 kilos of pumpkin and squash this year. I don't like pumpkin and I barely like squash, but honestly I grew it. Partly because we've got the space and we can, partly because my husband does eat it and so does my extended family, partly because I thought if worse comes to worse we could feed it to the pigs. But honestly the main reason we put in that survival garden was really just in case. I want to be self-reliant, and if things went wrong I would like to have a backup plan. And so for us the pumpkin and the squash was our backup plan, and I'm really happy I did grow it, because now my husband is doing the GAPS diet to try and sort out some gut issues, and a lot of that involves squash and pumpkin, and thankfully he doesn't hate it. He might hate it by the end of doing it for a couple of months, but it means that all of this pumpkin and squash that we have is going to good use, and it wasn't a waste. In hindsight it was a really good choice. So I will be growing these again next summer, despite the fact that I don't like them, and despite the fact my children, except for one, don't like them, and my husband likes it-ish. But if worst comes to worst, I would eat it if I had to. These squash have been hanging out in my tunnel house. This is my heated propagation bed, which I am going to check and make sure that the heating wire is actually working, because I have a suspicion it's been eaten by a mouse. But these guys need to go somewhere else. They can't hang out in here because it is winter now, and I like to propagate things on my heated propagation table. So I'm going to bring the wheelbarrow around and move these. I think we might just store them in the shed for now on some newspaper. I don't know a great deal about storing pumpkin because I don't eat it, but I do know that if it gets condensation underneath its bottom, like these have got some dampness on them now because it was quite cold overnight, if they get condensation on their bottoms when they're sitting on something hard, it will stay wet and it will rot out. So ideally we would have some kind of rack or some stacking baskets or something that we could store them in, but I don't have that right now, and I do have the time that I want to set up this propagation table. So I'm going to move these, we'll put them in the shed on some newspaper, and probably during the week I'll hopefully try and get some kind of basket thing to stack them in so that the air can go around them and that they don't get condensation on their bottoms. It's actually a holiday weekend here today, and Matthew and I are taking half a day each to do what we want to be doing. So for me, I'm spending half a day in the garden doing this and harvesting the things and all that sort of stuff, and he's going to spend half a day doing what he wants to do. So I've got half a day to get on and do what I want to do out here, knowing I'm not going to be interrupted by children. So I'm going to get on and move these pumpkins. At this time of year I find the garden gets away on me a little bit, partly because of the way the weather is, and partly because, to be honest, my motivation goes out the window when it's yucky outside. So I know that in the springtime I'm going to have a whole lot of weeds to catch up on, but I will try and get out to them occasionally during the winter if it's a nice day. In the veggie garden the carrots are producing, and we're still getting some cauliflower off the cauliflowers, which is really nice. There's some broccoli coming on, and the celery and celeriac are pretty much ready to be used. I'm using the celery as we're making soups and things, and I do add it to salads as well. And the garlic has yet to raise its little head above the soil, but I suspect that won't be too long away. But there's just weeds everywhere. The pathways are all full of weeds. That's one of the reasons why I tuck my beds up for the winter, is to help minimize the amount of weeds I get to have to deal with in the springtime. Suddenly the sun came out and it got hot in here, so I tied my hair up and taken my jumper off. I've managed to move all of the pumpkin and squash out of here, and now my table is nice and clear. Uh-oh, and your legs are stuck in the ground. And see, look at my nice clear table. It's actually got quite a few little bits and pieces on it from last time I've used it, but that's alright, it's leaves. I managed to get about 2 big bags, grain sacks of rubbish out from underneath this table as well, because I'm going to grow my barley fodder in here, and I'm hoping for the first couple of days while it just sprouts, I'll be able to put it on top of the shelf underneath my propagation table, and hopefully it will be okay to sprout there, and then I'll move it onto the racks once it needs some light. I just thought I would give you a little tour of the heated propagation setup. I do have a blog post on how I built this. Basically, it's a bathtub made of wood. You know, it's just a big tray made of heavy wood, and it's lined with the black polythene and then filled basically with either pea gravel or sand. And in amongst the layers of the pea gravel or sand is a heating wire. I just got a really cheap one from AliExpress. I think it cost me $20 or $30. And I was worried that it wasn't working, but I think it probably just wasn't turned on properly, because I've turned it on and it's working great. And then the other thing I have, these are some hoops just made of pipe. There's, you know, just hose held on with a couple of hose clamps, and I've just tied a piece of string along the top just to help secure them. And then we just have this sheet of plastic that pulls over the top of everybody to keep it nice and humid in here. I use this setup to propagate quite a few trees and bushes, those sorts of things, and it's also where I get my tomatoes and peppers started over the winter, rather than having to have them in the house. It's getting eye-wateringly bright out here. So that's why I have this massive propagation table. However, if you want to grow just a few things from cuttings, you can simply use a tray with some well-draining potting mix or some propagation sand, and put your sticks in there, and then just cut the bottoms off some bottles and stick those over the top. And then you just need to put them somewhere that gets lots of indirect light, so it needs lots of light, but not to bake in the sun or you'll kill them. And then usually you can just leave them sit like that for a month or two until the roots grow. So I have some inside. There's some blueberries and what are the other things? Those things that everybody likes that I don't like. Feijoa cuttings. I have some blueberries and some feijoa cuttings inside on the windowsill, as you can see. And they're just sitting, hanging out. There's no heat mat or anything with those. I'm going to cover up this propagation table with its plastic layer and then let it get up nice and warm. And then I have some great plans to propagate quite a few different things in there. So I'm not sure if I'll get around to doing that today. If I do, I'll show you. Otherwise, it will wait for another video. Next on my task list, because that's working, I've cleaned up in here and I've managed to harvest all those root crops. My next thing is I'm going to be setting up for some barley fodder. Now, I have grown barley fodder before in the past, and I used big plastic trays, but they were about $7 each. And to be honest, I'm not convinced that the mice aren't going to ruin this for me. I know we have mice in here. The mouse poo is quite obvious. So I have just splashed out and bought a couple of aluminium or aluminum, depending on how you want to say it, barbecue trays, roasting dishes. This one says a roasting tray. They're a decent enough size that I think we will probably use one for the pigs and one for the rabbits each day if all goes well, but for now I've only got 8 of them. And then I've just got some barley, so we'll go and grab the barley and then we'll come back here and I'll show you what we're going to do. So I'm not entirely sure how much barley I'm going to need. This is just whole barley that you can get from the feed store. We get it from a local guy. And so I've got this bag of barley and this tiny little pot that probably holds maybe 4 cups, I think. So I'm just going to guess and put 2 of these in the bucket and fill it up with water. Because this is the first time I've used this measure and it's the first time I've used the trays, it will be a little bit of a guess until I've worked out how many I need. Doing barley fodder is really easy, and there are all sorts of fancy automated ways you can organise to water them. I used to have a whole system set up where I could water the top and they'd all sort of filter down and water each other, and it was all sealed off, but the dog destroyed that very kindly after she discovered that the sparrows got in and they were fun to chase. So I stopped doing that. So I'm not going to actually put holes in the bottom of these foil trays. If you were setting up an automatic watering system, you'd definitely need holes. I'm going to try it without holes, partly to hopefully not have to water them quite so much, and partly to save on the amount of mess it makes. So I have soaked this barley pretty much overnight, and I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to need. So because it's my first go with these trays, it will just be a bit of a guess as to how many potfuls I need. But basically what you do is you soak it overnight and then you strain it, and then you just want it about 1/2 inch or 1 centimetre thick, give or take some, on the bottom of your tray. And hopefully without too much standing water. You just want them damp but not soaking wet. And what I'm hoping is once they've sprouted that they won't be so attractive to the mice. That's going to work, right? So then I'm just going to cover them with another tray and do the same. And then I'm actually going to cover that with another tray, because my secret plan is that mice can't eat through metal. I suspect they can, but shh, don't tell me. And then I'm going to sit them on the shelf for a day or 2, and then hopefully they will sprout. Once they're uncovered, so once they've sprouted, I'll obviously unstack them and move them into somewhere with some light, and then I'm just going to mist them with a little bit of water, just enough to keep them damp but not too much. I'm hoping I'm not going to have too much mold issues given that it's winter time, but time will tell. Come with me, I'll show you. See, down here on our propagation table I very cleverly built this little shelf to store things on, which really just means I leave a whole lot of rubbish in here. So I've cleared this shelf and put these down here, so hopefully after a day or 2 we'll get some sprouts, so I'll let you know how that goes. For now that's pretty much me done outside. I'm not entirely sure what the rest of the family's up to. I'm gonna go and have a look. What are you doing?
I am taking this over. Going over to Dad.
Who's this?
Poe.
Does he have a name?
Yes.
What'd you call him?
Poe.
This is Chloe's rooster Poe. What is he?
Pick and Bantam.
Why is he down here?
is Panda's needing her nails trimmed.
Yes, you do.
Sad.
Anybody want some of this muesli bar slice?
Yes, please.
Here you go.
Thank you.
So we made this muesli bar slice, but there was something wrong with the recipe and it just turned all into crumbs. So I made basically a simple brownie batter without the cocoa in it, and then threw half the muesli bar slice into it and made muesli bar blondies. Is it delicious?
Yes.
I hope you've enjoyed the video today. If you have, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. I'll see you in the next one.